Good afternoon, thank you. This afternoon's keynote speaker, Monica O. Montgomery, embodies all of the qualities of a 21st century leader in the cultural sector. She is hyper-focused on the issues of workers' rights, on cultivating our next generation of museum engineers. For those of you who know me, that was nothing. On cultivating our next generation of museum educators and staff, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, and on using the museum as a platform for exploring the intersections between identity, community, and activism. She is multifaceted, an internationally known speaker, university professor, cultural entrepreneur, and somehow, in all of her spare time, a museum director. She is entrepreneurial, the co-founder of Museum Q, a multicultural collective that aims to advance professionals of color in the creative economy, and as the founding director of the Museum of Impact, a mobile social justice museum whose inaugural exhibit, Movement in Rising, Journey of #Black Lives Matter, is currently touring the East Coast. She is creative. As the executive director of the Lewis Latimer Historic House, reinterpreting the museum experience using community-based practice and unexpected methodologies, such as the maker movement and STEAM, to bring history to life. And for our purposes today, Ms. Montgomery is also inspirational for the ways in which our work, be it reinterpreting history for modern times, exploring the ways in which art expresses culture, or the human impact of science, if fueled by courage, passion, and our desire to make better of our lives and those of our communities, can tackle even the toughest of topics. Please put your hands together and help me welcome Monica O. Montgomery this year.
I am Monica Montgomery, and yes, I do not sleep. It's true. I want to acknowledge all the intentional communities I've aligned myself here with, as I give a shout out to my support systems for self-growth and self-care, as well as critical reflection. So I'm not standing here alone. You might not see it or realize it, but there are a lot of people with me on the stage. People that may not have been able to come to AAM, but that are supporting what's happening here today. I want to give a shout out to Museum Q, the organization I co-founded along with my co-founder, Stephanie Cunningham, which is a platform for the university. I want to give a shout out to Museum Workers Speak, which is a collective of activist museum workers interrogating the relationship between museum stated commitments to social value and internal labor practices. Let's clap it up for them. And I want to give a shout out to another collective I'm part of, Shift, which is a New York City-based collective of cultural workers creating essential restorative spaces, spearheaded by educator Kiana Hendricks. Let's clap it up for them. So clearly all this means I'm popular, I'm not sleeping, I'm always on the go, but more importantly, I am an educator at heart. For several years I was an early childhood educator, teaching pre-K through 2nd grade. I've also been a museum educator for many years, and now I have the good fortune of, in my educational ethos, being an administrator with an educator's heart. I really want to pay you all a compliment in this room. Your work as educators and educational advocates is so important and so necessary. I'm not sure how many people of faith are in the room, and hopefully no one's offended by me saying this, but educators are doing God's work. Clap it up for yourself. I mean, when we think about it, oftentimes we're facing the short attention span of the audiences that we serve. With vigor, with insight, with wit, I would say that education is the life's blood of museums and cultural institutions. For all the time that you've led a gallery tour and someone was looking at their phone. For all the times your family program or adult program was ignored. For all the times your skillful facilitation conversation was overlooked, for all the times your tireless dedication wasn't acknowledged, I say to you on behalf of the visiting public, educators' lives matter. You are appreciated. The beauty of education is that you're teaching and learning simultaneously. There's a symbiotic exchange between our visitors and ourselves. And teachable moments are all around us. That's what I want to talk about today. The name of this presentation is entitled, Tackling Tough Topics, Teachable Moments. So, swirling through our subconscious, we're wondering about the world and its relation to humanity. And many of our museums are helping interrogate this. In museums, teachable moments take many forms. They emerge when we're ready and armed with pedagogy and curriculum, and when we're not so ready. When it's least expected, when it comes out of the mouth of a kid on a field trip, or a questioning teen, or a mildly offended senior citizen. We know this story well. But how can we use these tough topics and transforming them into teachable moments to affect change and enlighten audiences in our institution around the big ideas within our collections and content? How can we become institutions that have conversations that really matter, that are relevant to the communities we serve and our stated commitment to them? How can we stop being so self-important and biased, yes, biased, in many cases, in our interactions with community, and start doing deep listening to our visitors and validating their lived experience? I would like to speak about all of this today because I think that museum education has the power and responsibility to do challenging inner work. Tackling tough topics and turning them into teachable moments is demanded in this social justice climate we live in this era of Black Lives Matter and the plethora of social issues that we're facing. This is not a time to shy away from contemporary issues, but rather to embrace them. Within the Museum Workers Speak Collective, we always talk about ending the whispers and breaking silences. And that's what I would challenge all of us to do as educators. As culturally responsive educators, we need to meet the demand of society. So, ways that we can tackle tough topics. Number one, extract and expel implicit bias from your work life. And let me pause. If you are tweeting me, which I hope you are, at Monica_Muses on Twitter. And we're back. All right. Extracting and expelling implicit biases from your work life, it means not tainting your visitors with your bias and your views, allowing them to form their own conclusions where it's developmentally appropriate. I'm going to tell a little story about how this didn't happen at a time when I went on a tour and I was rather offended by the tour guide. And I'm not a senior citizen and I'm not a retiree. I was legitimately offended because this was a tour at an academic museum that had work from local and regional artists. And one of the artists featured was a photographer from Baltimore. And we all know the story last year around this time for AAM of the Baltimore uprising and the things that happened there. And so the tour guide happened to be the director of this academic museum and took us to the part where this Baltimore photography was and said, and this is photography from such and such artists out of Baltimore, a place you wouldn't want to be caught dead at night. After what happened there, I wouldn't encourage anyone to go. And I was so shocked and so appalled. And even if he felt that way, he should have kept that on the inside. And there's no space in a gallery or a museum. But his bias toward Baltimore and what he perceived as the dangerousness of it, the uncomfortability of the situation, led him to influence a tour of 25 people to never visit Baltimore, despite having art on the wall that celebrated the beauty of the urban community. This is a space where we have to take our implicit biases out of the galleries, out of the museums, out of the cultural institutions, and let visitors form their own conclusions, so as not to offend folks like myself and others. Number two, tell the truth. We are arbiters of culture, and we have this institutional power that we have to start telling the truth about ourselves and our institutions. Truth-telling is ripe for personal story and historic context. So giving visitors the full picture is really what we come to do. This is especially applicable in history museums. A lot of times, historic houses like the one I direct are a little conservative, a little nervous. Don't touch this, don't say that, whisper here. And I think that there's opportunities for historic houses to take a bold step in the right direction, especially when addressing race and slavery, which is an issue that is unavoidable at this point. Another fun anecdote, and I swear I've had good experiences in museums too, but for these purposes, I'm going to talk about the questionable ones. Another fun anecdote, as part of a historic house council of directors, we were speaking about our different interpretive plans and the way that we're talking about tough topics. And this council of directors is pretty much a monolith, all white, female and male, and I was the only black millennial director in the room, which is not uncommon, but needs to be questioned. And so we were talking about how race and slavery could be interpreted. And so I was talking about the work we do at the Latimer House, with Louis Latimer's parents having been enslaved Africans that did escape to the north, and the way that they were supported there, and telling that full story when people first come in the door. And one of the historic house directors said, can't we just have an Easter egg without all that, Easter egg hunt without all that sad stuff? I don't want to talk about sad stuff in the museum. And I was shocked and appalled because that sad stuff is history. And that's what we're there to interpret. And I had to tell her, your disillusionment, your desire to sanitize history is blinding you from sharing the full truth, the nuanced history of enslaved Africans and their circumstances. And that the patriarchal hero of her particular house was a slave owner. And that also Easter egg hunts can be served with a side of social justice. So oftentimes we have to be that person that's speaking truth to power, that's speaking out against persuasive prevailing views that are not those of equity and that are not those of truth. And I think in the spirit of being a reflective practitioner for ourselves and for our institutions, we have to notice our behavior as educators and administrators and realize how it can influence others and our colleagues. And recognize our privilege. Everyone is fond of saying check your privilege, but let's think, what are our privileges? We're privileged to be in this career. We're privileged because we have language that is, in many cases, English and sometimes other languages. Our gender, our ability, our citizenship, our race, all of those are privileges that we have, and some of our visitors may not share those privileges. And so we had to unpack that to really tackle some topics and turn them into teachable moments. Imagine feeling yourself in the visitor's shoes and trying to adjust to better help them contextualize and process what's in your museum. Thirdly, I would say it's important to lean into discomfort. Now, I know the Facebook lady said lean in. But this kind of leaning in is different. This is not so much about climbing the career path, but more so finding ways to tackle tough topics by not avoiding them, not shying away from them, by diving into that discomfort and exploring where it's come from and having meaningful conversations with our visitors. Figure out the baseline where people are starting from and these through lines which look to jump off conversations so that we can find commonalities. Tough topics are only tough for those who don't want to really have conversations, who don't like to problematize the status quo and nuance the narrative. And tough is relative. If we project ourselves onto the needs and desires of our visitors and imagine what's appropriate for them and what they can and cannot handle, we do them a disservice. Our comfort and our values, our background, is not necessarily our visitors. And we have to give them the chance and the choice to tackle these tough topics with us and turn them into teachable moments. In this current climate, in the United States of extrajudicial killings, there's a lot of discomfort about speaking about racial equity and police brutality and extrajudicial violence. Some see it as divisive and an issue that will cause contention. I see it as an opportunity, and I created an exhibit to explore this and the ways that we're seeking justice. And I am happy to report that the exhibit, The Movement is Rising, has toured the New York area and at this point has been seen by 5,000 people that all wanted to tackle this tough topic. I think if we imagine ourselves as change makers, as educators that can tackle tough topics, we would approach things differently. I would love to do a little exercise. Yes, Jason, I'm going off script. I'd love to do a little exercise with the new friends at your table. We're all friends now. We're going to call it the Situation Room. So how many of you have heard of Kehinde Wiley? Kehinde Wiley's work? Okay. So we all know his amazing work and many of the themes explored therein. If you don't know, ask a friend next to you. So imagine you are an educator or you're managing educators in an art museum setting where Kehinde Wiley's work is showing. And imagine that a white middle school student on a tour of the work says, that's a painting of a gang member. Turn to your neighbor and talk about how you tackled that tough topic. 2 minutes. One thing I noticed about every table in the room, whether you agreed or you disagreed, everyone was willing to converse. The tough topic didn't scare you. You didn't run out the room. You didn't flee from your dessert. You talked. You talked. You talked with the person next to you and the people across the table from you, and you exchanged and you shared, and that's the power of what we can do as educators. Not everyone had the same approach. Some people wouldn't tackle it all. Some people would dive in, but we all were willing to talk, and that's the same way our audiences feel. They're willing to talk. Using this sort of thinking and these ideas you came up with at the table as an entry point to dive deeper into discovery, discomfort, and revelation helps us interrogate the way our cultural institutions can be and informing the worldview of our visitors. Just because a kid says, does that mean he's in a gang, doesn't mean the tour has to end. Questioning assumptions on how the student views the world and what his visual culture interpretation is, and appreciating the difference in students' lived experiences are all ways to react. Using visual thinking strategies is a way to react. Suspending your judgment and broadening the horizons and racial sensitivity that can be experienced in that moment is a way to react. In my mind, this tackling the tough topics is more about the process of learning versus the end goal of memorization. And that's where those teachable moments come in. In closing, museums are these revered temples of delight and reliquaries of collections, but imagine that they can also become sites of social action and civic discourse and meaningful exchanges, bringing context to art, history, science, and beyond, emphasizing this critical thinking and this reflection. I believe our museums can do this, that they can evolve into hubs of learning and questioning and seeking and emoting and understanding and contextualizing. Spaces of equity where everyone is visible and heard, respected, where there's shared agency and power and all identities are accepted. We've moved past shame, blame, and critique into these teachable moments. It's hard to imagine a perfect world, but if we continue to tackle tough topics, we can transform them into teachable moments. Thank you.